context, what do we mean by prioritization? So that's where we call it as backlog grooming in Agile or backlog refinement. So what does that mean? It means you're refining the items from a very, very overview, very high level to actually kind of very woolly 30,000 feet overview. I need a catalog as a feature. To I need to have item identifier, which is a GUID, which is a 16-digit character, which is stored in the database. Or I need to have an item photo, which should be in JPEG, which should be of 500 by 600 pixels, and which should be in PNG or JPEG format, and which should not have a resolution bigger than so and so. So what you're talking about, detailing, right? So that detail is not there initially, but as you try and grow and getting deeper and deeper into the specification, and you put in your thinking hats, that gets more and more granular, more and more detailed. And the more detailed and the more granular an item is, that goes to the top of the backlog. And whatever the items that are on the top of the backlog would actually be chosen for the sprint that gets prioritized for the next sprint or the next iteration. So an example for that is, I quickly came up with an example. So you've got these requirements at the very high level, very, very high level. I need a catalog. I need to have an admin module. I need to have a shopping cart functionality. I should have a payment gateway. That's how the requirements are. Very, very woolly, very big, very high level. From there on, what you're trying to do is to actually get deeper and deeper, try and get more from the epic level. You actually try and create stories, from the stories to the tasks. And these stories at the top, very top, are the ones which are detailed, which are granular for you to be able to assign to a sprint. They're ready. So that's what we call as, we'll discuss that in the session tomorrow. There are two very important fundamental principles in Agile. One is called the definition of done, and the other one is called definition of ready. So we're going to discuss that tomorrow anyway. I'm just giving you an example. So the definition of ready for this particular set of stories is that they're complete. They're ready for picking up for development. So then they can be attached, they can be assigned to a sprint to be developed. They're well defined. So that could potentially become, this set of sprint, the stories could actually become the sprint backlog. So that could be done in the next 3 weeks, for example. So all these other items, we don't know when they could be done. They could be done in 2 years. Some of this could be done, perhaps they can be dropped because we don't need. Some of them are not relevant at all. So again, they can be dropped. So we do not know anything about all these other items below this sprint backlog. So in Agile, what is most important is what you are seeing now. What is the next important thing? What is the next piece of work that you need to work and deliver? You do not need to worry about, it's like a blinkered view. It's like how you put the blinkers on for the cows and other animals. So they don't have to really look and everywhere and get distracted. The same way in Agile, it's all about the blinkered approach of pretty focused, pretty straightforward, focused attention to the short-term thing, to the thing that you need to work on in the next 3 weeks. That's it. You don't have to worry about, as development team, you do not worry about all the other things that you have below. There might be 3,000 or 10,000 items below. Don't worry about it. All you need to worry about is just these 5 or 6 items that you need to deliver in the next 3 weeks. And again, what happens after 3 weeks is, before that, the next up user stories will be made ready by the product owner in the business. They'll add more details, they groom that, and then they'll push it up. They'll add more details to that. The business analyst adds to acceptance criteria, create some wireframes, add the Gherkin statements, add more and more descriptions, give estimates, the user story points that are attached to them. And then we'll have an idea as to what is the size of these the requirements, what's the kind of potential effort there that is needed for them. And then that is actually groomed and they're made ready for the next sprint, potentially. And then finally, we've got the epic level, which are deep down. Don't worry about the epics. Don't worry about, because they're too woolly, too kind of very high level, very abstract, not clear at all, not detailed at all. That's okay. You don't have to worry about it. What you need to worry about is just this as a development team. That's what Agile is. That's the beauty of Agile, because you are freezing up. You're actually kind of keeping this as frozen so nobody can touch. It's locked from the business, locked from the product owner. They cannot come here and change this, for example, because it's already being worked on in the next 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, obviously, they have got that all the freedom in the world to come back and change it, because that's what Agile is, isn't it? It's all about how you can accommodate changes and keep running with that. So that's a brief explanation of how really the grooming and the refinement works practically in Agile development. And then in the context of, for example, I was telling this case study yesterday about how we prioritize this for one of the sites in a previous project of mine. So you're talking about view list of sites, view site details, add site access details. So these are all CRUD type use cases, right? They're CRUD. They're like add, view, delete, modify. Or you can say create, review, update, delete, CRUD. So all of these are like that. So what we do is we then assign the priority, we then assign them to a particular iteration, and then we assign them to a team and then work upon it as and when we get done. That would actually kind of move up in the list. As and when it is detailed enough, you get moved up, and that gets chosen for one sprint, assigned to a sprint, that gets done, and then that gets moved on. If there's any change in this, for example, edit the site could actually have a lot of changes later, that's all right. After 3 weeks, again, we can work on that. We can bring it back. That's why it's called iterative. It goes on and on, it goes in a loop. It's not as if it's done and dusted, we should not touch it. No, it's not waterfall. It's agile, it's iterative. It works in continuous improvement. So the site that you're working on now and delivering at the end of the 3 weeks by October last week, if there's any change to that, obviously there could be a lot of changes to that. If there are changes, you can again pick it back and you work on the changes later, again, based on the business urgency and priority. So again, that's very important for you. So based on this, depending on this is called a Kanban board. Again, we discussed this last time around as well. So a Kanban board of showing all the stories where they are, and then what kind of estimates they have, whether it is a 4-story point or a 5-story point, or it could be something like it is in the backlog. So this is the product backlog. And then all the items that are actually being here are basically the ones that are being worked in this sprint as we speak. So this is a sprint, this particular, from here to here is a sprint backlog. And this one is a product backlog. So it can have like thousands of items on the left, but then what matters is in the next 3 weeks, for example, I'm working only on this 10 stories. That's what matters. It doesn't have to worry about the rest of the 990 odd stories in the backlog. So these 10 stories, depending on where they are, you can actually kind of track. Are they being in progress? Are they done? Development is completed? Are they being tested now? Are they being deployed already? So you can see that this gives you a quick indication of the progress of the work in that sprint in the next 3 weeks. So this is a Kanban board. It's called a visual information radiator. It radiates the information visually. So you don't have to ask 10 people, what is the status? What is the status? So because the team updates this on almost a regular basis, you know the status of the progress of work just by looking at it. Oh yeah, okay, I've got 2 that's work in progress. Perhaps that can be done quickly. I've got 1 that is already deployed. This, for example, the catalog showing the items is already done. They're working on the showing the review for the item. They're working on, for example, showing the 360-degree view of that item. And then this other story could be the, for example, ability to add to a cart. So these are the things that you can actually kind of look at it from that angle. Again, this is the product backlog. This is sprint backlog, the items here. And it's not necessarily story C. It could be task, it could be defect, it could be a change in the requirement. All of those could be part of the work, the progress that we track in the agile development. So needless to say, groom it to bloom it. So backlog refinement, very, very important. But the most important thing you need to realize is that the product backlog gets updated by the product owner or the product manager or the business team or the customer team. So it's not the development team. So whoever sets, mostly in the Scrum, we'll talk about these roles and responsibilities and all these in greater detail tomorrow and the next few weeks as well, where we take deep dives into Scrum, into Lean, into Safe. Each of these models and methods have got their own roles and their own ways of doing things. So you can understand it better there. But then for now, just understand that the product backlog is actually kind of updated. It gets added, the items get added, items, they remove the items, they change the priority, they move the shuffle the items back and forth, up and down, depending on the prioritization that they think it is important and urgent by the product team. It could be product owner, business team, customer team, whatever it is. And then once it gets into the sprint backlog would actually be managed by the development team. So once it gets into the sprint, as we discussed, the 3-week sprint that we have starting from tomorrow, let's say, within the 3 weeks, it gets locked up. The scope is locked, it's frozen. Nobody can enter into this. Nobody can make it change what you're working on now. So you can decide as team as to which one you want to work out of these 6 items or 10 items. So leave alone those 990 items in the backlog. The rest of the items that you have assigned for the sprint, the current 3-week sprint, you can take a call. You can decide when you want to work on what out of these 10. And then you deliver that at the end of the 3 weeks. So very important. So the sprint backlog is managed by the development team. That includes the analysts, developers, testers, architects, SMEs, whoever is there as part of the development team. And then the product backlog is groomed and refined by the product owner or product team, you can say. So here, that's what we were talking about. It could be requirements. The backlog can have requirements, ideas, defects, any kind of wishes, wants. It can have tasks. All of those are part of the backlog. They check everything in there. And then they prioritize. Once you prioritize it, I need to do this, I need to do this. That gets in order of prioritization. You can apply Moscow principle there. We'll talk about the Moscow next up. So that actually gets assigned a priority, and in terms of importance and urgency, whatever. And then that gets moved into the sprint. Those items that are moved into the sprint backlog would be prioritized and then estimated by the team. That's called grooming. And then they would be working in tandem as a team, and then that gets delivered by the end of the sprint. And again, this continues, right? That's the continuous development we were talking about. Continuous development, continuous delivery, continuous integration, and continuous improvement of the